Welcome to Commander Central, episode 233, and today we'll be talking about rejecting modern Magic play design and finding the joy in playing your own way. I'm Dana.
I'm Max.
I'm Chris.
And I'm Dylan.
Dylan, how's it going?
Hello. It's going pretty good. I'm happy to be here.
We have a guest here today for our listeners, patron supporter Dylan. She's been one of our supporters for a long time now, and is going to be our first patron supporter guest we've had in the show. So, Dylan, thank you very much for supporting us and supporting the show. We really appreciate it. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you and when you started playing Magic and Commander?
Yeah, sure. First off, happy. Thank you for having me on. I just want to do a quick shout out to CMDR Central lads Ben, Glenn, Nick, Stuart, and Tim. I get a lot of games with them, so I just wanted to say hi. But yeah, so I started playing around 99, 2000, around the release of 7th edition.
So you're old school at this point now.
I guess so. I don't feel like it, but I suppose that's the title for it. Yeah, I started playing on my friend's living room floor with his dad's. What I now realize were super old beta and revised cards, completely unsleeved. As it goes. Who knows where those cards are now? But I just kind of casually played as a young person who enjoys Magic. Up until around 2011, I started taking a notice of Commander, and in 2013, I got the Aloro Precon, and I've been all in on Commander ever since, playing several times a week when I can.
So that's roughly the same timetable. We all kind of started playing Commander as well. So we've all been kind of doing it roughly the same amount of time. So that's actually kind of interesting. I think that's when a lot of people really started getting into it too, when those precons first started hitting. And a bunch of people also came back to the game roughly around the same point in time because of Return to Ravnica.
Yeah.
There was a big spike there, so yeah, a lot of people are kind of on that similar page as well. What about Commander sucked you in when you kind of got into the format? Why was that an attractive thing to you?
Well, at the time I had a bunch of friends. We all kind of casually played kitchen table Magic, and we had heard of this Commander thing, but it sounded very complicated and spooky, so we just did 100 card singleton, which is kind of its own thing as well, until one time we were at Barnes & Noble or something, and we actually took a look at those Commander cards that were on the front face of the precon, and we were like, oh, this actually looks pretty cool. So this is something you can really only do with the Commander thing. Maybe we should figure out how this works. Turns out it's very simple. Obviously, it's nearly the same as normal Magic. But from there, all of us got all of the 2003 precons, and we were like, this is a blast. It's all started from there.
So what is your current favorite deck that you play?
So I like to sort my decks into EDH and then CEDH, two separate building and play philosophies. My favorite casual deck, just normal EDH, as Richard Garfield intended, is my Quende Double Strikers deck, which you guys actually did a little deck tech on. Mono white, combat oriented, a bit of an underdog. You play Quende and they're like, who? What is that? So it's a favorite pet deck of mine. Making a quote unquote bad color coordination good, or as good as I can get it at least. My favorite CEDH deck is a little homebrew of Neheb the Eternal, which I've turned into a bit of a combo storm deck, which I really like playing. It's a bit oppressive though, so gotta play it at the right tables.
Sure.
So, first off, I've played against that Quende deck, and it can wreck face, so I'm so happy when we get to see decks that we do the decks you play on, finally, so that's awesome. But what about your favorite card, Dylan? What is your favorite card in Magic?
I'm a red player at heart. I have a lot of cards that, I like a lot, but Blood Moon has got to be my favorite, just overall Magic card.
See, red's the best color in Magic. I tell everyone that.
Right? Exactly.
Again, you are mispronouncing green, but we'll handle that on a different show.
I don't know. But yeah, Blood Moon, it's just the perfect Magic card, right? It shuts off oppressive strategies if you're land greedy, it equalizes the playing field. You're playing against someone with all the duels, and they're totally screwed against a Blood Moon. Meanwhile, the guy next to you playing all, basic swamps is okay, so it's an interesting card. I like how it punishes awkward or greedy deck design. It's the ultimate underdog card, in my opinion, at least.
I would like to chime in on Blood Moon here.
Oh boy.
As someone who runs what I would describe as greedy land faces, absolutely. And someone who doesn't necessarily like oppressive strategies to lock down the board. I completely agree that Blood Moon is perfectly fair, and when someone casts one against me, my first reaction is, yeah, that's my fault. Like, it's
Right.
on me for running 8 basic lands in my deck. That's my fault for doing that, and I have been appropriately punished for doing it. So despite all of those things being true about how I look at cards, I have zero problem with Blood Moon. That is on me when you burn me with it.
So, in my personal opinion, Blood Moon is the greatest Magic card.
I felt like that was coming.
Nice.
No,
Okay.
it is a very powerful card, especially in Commander bases, due to the simple fact of everyone that I've ever played against, they're greedy with their mana bases. I mean,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter who it is. No matter how many times we've told people, you should run X amount of, basics in every deck, and they're still like, no, I mean, Dana's one, I've played your Glissa deck.
Yeah.
And that one day I'm like, Dana, there's like 5 basic lands in this deck. Yeah, I know. Why?
do as I say, not as I do.
Yes. So.
And to be fair, you've got so many mana dorks these days, so many mana rocks. There's other ways to get your colors outside of your now mountains.
Exactly. And red needs every advantage they can get. That's why, they got to have the Blood Moons. Give me another one.
If red is the best color, why do you need advantage?
Because
he's got us there.
Got him.
Because Magic philosophy teaches us that Wizards of the Coast has decided that green deserves everything from card draw to creatures to removal.
That is also not wrong. Yeah, he's not wrong there.
So, question for you. Do you have a specific Commander philosophy, or do you just kind of run by the seat of your pants type of deal?
Yeah, so I'm a deck builder at heart, and that kind of influences how I want to play my games. I'm a big fan of the social aspect of Commander. If I want to just grind wins, I'll jump on Arena or Magic the Gathering online. So I'm not really a fan of stomping. I like to say like a well-earned, blood-soaked victory is so much more satisfying than glassing a planet from orbit, right? The little scene from Mad Max, we spray paint on their mouth and witness me, which is part of the reason why I like playing Neheb. I find myself sometimes where I've got the right type of cards where I can kill everybody on the board, including myself. But that's really the only path to quote unquote victory. So, when I'm in those kind of situations, I'm like, all right, guess we're all going down, guys. I really find the camaraderie that I get, hopefully other people get as well, out of Commander as more important than the victory itself. It's a 4-player casual format. Let's be real, this is like a board game. I don't really like the try-hard aspect in casual EDH, which is the majority of it for most people, right? 1v1 is different, though, as is CEDH. I kind of lump them in the same field. And that's what I like out of competitive EDH, actually, is that chess mentality, right? We're here to have a good time and BS and talk to each other, but if the type of game we're playing is CEDH, there's this focus on technicality and competitiveness and really tight gameplay. And if you've got the right deck and mindset for it, I think it can be just as fun.
Well, and you definitely remove the feel bad factor for the most part, too. Like, because I've heard that before, that it phrased badly where, like, fun isn't a consideration. And I think that's definitely not true. It's just part of the implicit fun in playing competitively is that there are, like, no rules. I shouldn't say no rules, but, like, nothing is held back. So your fun is going as hard as humanly possible, including locking somebody out and preventing them from playing and casting spells. That is baked into the experience. So it's not that it's not fun, it's just that is what the fun is. And I think
exactly.
That is a cause for confusion sometimes for people, or at least in terms of describing it, they do a bad job of that.
Definitely. It's a bit of an optics issue, I think.
Yeah, for sure. CDH, I think, is still suffering from, and still suffers from routinely those people in your LGS that show up with their pub stomp deck and describe what they're doing as CEDH.
Yeah. I'm still surprised that that's a thing, but it's pervasive even with play EDH. I feel like obviously maybe pervasive is the wrong word. It happens a lot. It may not be the majority of games that you'll play with randos, right? But it happens more than I'd like. I wish we could all just be clear with each other and honest.
Yeah, it's not ideal. And I think it's gotten better, I would say, the last few years as the CEDH community has gotten more vigilant about monitoring people as well and making, folks kind of aware of what's going on. I think the incidents of that have dropped off, as well as the increase of people having that rule zero conversation. It's helped quite a bit, for sure.
Definitely. The first thing I do when I sit down with anyone I don't know is, hey, what's up? I've got decks of every level here. What are we interested in playing? So
If anything, though, actually, the fact that we've done this podcast has allowed me to get a little lazy in that regard. And I'm wondering if that's true. I know Max plays a bit on camera, too, because everyone knows what you're playing at, what your power level is. So you can kind of shortcut that, which probably isn't necessarily great in terms of like building habits. But I've definitely kind of gotten a little lazy about it, particularly playing on webcam, because I know everyone I'm playing with usually.
Yeah, I definitely will agree with that, Dana. I think Dylan and I played a game the other night, and I got in the pod and said, I have 90 minutes. This has to be a fast game, so if it's okay, I want to play Tuvasa because it's my fast deck. I'm either going to win or lose quickly. And right. I mean, Dylan can describe that game went off the rails, and it lasted 90 minutes. We hit that time slot perfectly, which I find kind of hilarious, honestly.
Yeah, it ended right at the perfect time there. I believe you ended up having a 5,000 power toughness Tuvasa or something.
500, but yeah.
500, okay,
man.
excuse me.
Was that enabled by, what's the giant?
Nylea's Colossus.
Nylea's Colossus. Seriously, that card is bonkers in an Enchantress deck. I'm genuinely shocked it doesn't see more play in those kind of decks. So if anyone in listener land would like to share with us any games you've played recently or talk about Nylea's Colossus or your Rule Zero conversation or anything at all, how would you do that, Chris?
You can find us on a multitude of social media platforms. You can find us on Twitter at CMDR Central. You can search us up on Facebook, CMDR Central. You can find us on YouTube by searching CMDR Central. And you can find us online at cmdrcentral.com.
You can also find us on patreon.com/CMDRCentral, where you can check out our reward tiers, such as a guest spot on the show like Dylan is doing today. And for all those that support us financially, thank you so much. It makes the show keep going. I guess puts me in pants, but nobody is here to witness that, so we'll be okay with that. Along with just, having fun. And we also want to thank everybody who just listens and gives us that thumbs up on YouTube or their podcasting platform. Again, that just makes us show up easier in searches, and we appreciate everybody listening every single week.
Yeah, any level of engagement means a lot. We do appreciate it. I think we have the new playmat. By the time this show airs, Max will have already ordered those for us. And I think we put the design up on our Slack. Probably on Monday we can tweet it out on Twitter as well.
Yep.
That looks really good, so I'm excited to get one of those in. And that is available as a Patreon reward as well for people. And we'll be sending one to Dylan once we get them in.
Oh, thank you.
You bet. Okay, so the main topic here, that probably sounded a little bit vague when I read it off at the very top of the show, so I guess we can go into it here a little bit. This was something suggested to us initially by Dylan, and I thought it made sense because this is kind of a concept we've talked about a little bit in the past, but not really dug into. And talking about rejecting modern Magic play design isn't quite right and feels a little bit negative. The phrasing is probably better to note that the current EDH design seems to be nudging players towards a playstyle, and if that's not the playstyle you want, we're going to talk about, first of all, why that playstyle is a thing that's kind of become prevalent, and talk about ways to dodge that or play differently if you want to play it differently. So the main thing I've noticed the last few years is the game has kind of steered into a design space that makes you basically chase packs. And obviously Magic wants you to buy packs, and there's always been things baked into the game to make you want to go buy packs, but the dial feels turned up to 10 a little bit in the last few years. To use kind of a weird analogy, cigarettes are a thing that exist out there, and people have always rolled cigarettes and smoked tobacco, at least in recent history. And at some point, people decided to sell those cigarettes. When they did, they put them like in a good-looking packaging and gave it a cool name, and those things are designed to make people want to purchase that product. But I think there's a difference between that and intentionally engineering strains of tobacco to be addictive, or, using cartoon mascots to make children want to buy cigarettes to kind of get them hooked for life. I think those are two different levels of sales. And yes, this is overly dramatic, but I think there's a bit of that with WotC and their design right now, where like they're pushing the sales of packs in a way that feels a little bit more, I don't know if sinister is the right word, but it feels a little bit more on the engineered tobacco line versus we just made a pretty box.
Yeah, it's more directed towards multiple demographics over just your regular player base.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's relentless too. I mean, there's twice as much product as there was a few years ago. We've gone from them adding mythics to packs to them adding, foils to borderless mythic foils to etched borderless mythic, like
to making just mythic packs now, or
right, exactly, right, and that just has changed things. Just because change occurs doesn't mean it's bad, but it doesn't mean it's good either.
You don't know me. Change is bad.
That change.
Don't do that.
Well, it changes things. Like if you enjoyed the game where it was in stasis and it's now different, then maybe it is bad. Okay, so let's talk about the changes to the game and what this has wrought in the first place. And I think Dylan has a few things here we can start with. What are the noted changes that you've came across in the 6, 7, 8 years that you've been playing Commander?
Yeah, so I'll just spitball some things, and we can go along with them. So I've got a list of things here that I think have been some notable changes, at least in reference to Commander, but definitely they apply to Magic as a whole as well. I think the biggest one that comes to mind for a lot of people is enablers and payoffs being slotted onto the same card, which seems to be a relatively recent thing, at least with the amount of them being released. A super easy dead horse to beat here is Tulane, for example. Kind of does it all on its own, right? Also, obviously, a larger focus on legendary creatures and Commander itself as a format has really changed the way they make these packs. Artifact mana as well. Used to be either you had to get something really, really expensive to be incredibly efficient, or you were happy with fairly middling tempo and value. Your Gilded Lotus, your Chromatic Lanterns. They're fine, they're good, but they're no Arcane Signet or
right.
Grim Monolith, right? Things like Arcane Signet is definitely like a big topic there. Another one, I feel like Bug, Blue, Black, and Green have really taken off in power and potency, I feel like, in a way that Red and White haven't really. We can go over that, but I think when you compare marquee cards of various colors, Blue, Black, and Green, they're killing it these days. Along with that, I think what dovetails into that is graveyards. Graveyard usage has been revitalized, I feel like. Graveyards were pretty powerful back in the day of Delve, I think, but maybe in a slightly different way. You can do anything with your graveyard now, almost no matter what color or strategy you're running out of. And then lastly, more of an aesthetic thing, the Secret Lair stuff is a bit of a different space that we're seeing the game go with, The Walking Dead and the Godzilla cards. I don't think they're necessarily inherently bad. I don't prefer them aesthetically, but, it is what it is. And then lastly, like you said earlier, product overload. There's just so many things coming out, so many variations. It can be kind of hard to keep track of things.
Yeah, for sure. So a lot of these things have kind of led to a power creep, I think, which is, for the most part, what we're talking about. Yeah. And power's a weird thing. In the passage of time just causes power creep in any kind of game, I think, for the most part. To use a few examples, World of Warcraft. When the game first came out, so we're at, I think it's closing in on 15 years or 16 years? 16 years.
I don't even remember now, man.
Yeah, I just checked. 16 years. So the very first raid in World of Warcraft, Molten Core, from release till the first kill of the last boss in Molten Core took 154 days. Last year, they released what's called Classic WoW, which is basically the original WoW servers, like with the same patches and on the exact same cycle as they were originally. So it's like playing the game as it was 16 years ago. Yep. From release to the first Ragnaros kill took 5 days. And that's with the same exact tools. It's not like the game has been patched and changed. Like, that's with literally the same equipment, the same gear in the game. What's changed is the player's understanding of how to play it. Obviously some things are different, computers are faster, that kind of thing, but like not the difference between 5 days and 154 days. That's just because how the players understand the game has changed.
Yeah, you don't have any Leroy Jenkins going running in and...
Yeah, right. The other example I'll use for this is the 3-point shot in the NBA. The 3-point line is at 23 feet and 9 inches, and throughout most of the history of basketball that the 3-point line has existed, teams kind of judged whether or not you should take a 3-pointer based on the percentage of making a 3-pointer, right? So like if a team, I'm just using made up numbers here for an example, but like if a team on average shot 25% for a 3-pointer, that's 75 points per 100 shots taken. 25% equals 25 made shots times 3, 75 points. If you made 45% of your 2-pointers, well, that's 90 points per shot per 100 shots taken. So the thought process was you take 2-pointers unless your 3-pointer is wide open or you have somebody who's like a deadly 3-point shooter or something. So like that was the logic. Until somebody actually thought about it and did the math and broke it down and kind of realized, well, you're not really comparing 3-pointers to 2-pointers. You're comparing shots taken at 23 feet and 9 inches to every single shot taken from 23 feet 8 inches all the way down to 1 inch.
Yep.
And those aren't the same. So once somebody went through and broke it down and said, okay, well, what's the percentage, at shots taken from 3 feet and in, and 5 feet and in, and 10 feet and in, they realize that it's not really a comparison of 3-pointers and 2-pointers, but a comparison of 3-pointers and shots taken from like 10 feet in. So then the game changed from only take 3-pointers when your guy is wide open or a great shot to take a whole bunch of 3-pointers unless you have somebody standing 5 feet away from the hoop with the ball. And as a result, like today in basketball, twice as many 3-point shots get taken as of 15 or 20 years ago because someone just realized, oh, we didn't understand how the math of the game worked.
Yeah, if you also notice too with basketball is the point average is different too. Instead of like 80 points to win a game, now it's like 120 points to win a game.
Sure. Right. Well, and if you look, go watch the video of a basketball game in the 80s or even early 90s to today, the guys playing basketball today are absolutely shredded. And the guys that were playing basketball 25 years ago look like they're putting up drywall. They're just like tall dudes. They're just average tall guys.
Larry Bird.
Right. Whereas like the guys today are just absolute monsters. So that nothing has changed about the court or the ball or the lines painted on the wood. It's just the understanding of the game and the players playing it and what they're doing has changed. So I wanted to mention all of that. That was a long conversation there to me to make the point that while the game has changed, I don't want to blame all of it on cards or card design. Understanding of the game and how people like interact with that math is going to change what the result is, no matter what happens. Commander's a relatively new format, and things like EDH Rec are relatively new in the grand scheme of things. And even this podcast, when we started doing this show a couple years back, I remember having the conversation where like, we could do a podcast because there's only Command Zone and Commanderin and Commander's Brew, and I can't remember who else there was, but like, we could have that conversation about the 4 or 5 people that were doing Commander podcasts. I don't know if I could name all of the people doing Commander podcasts or YouTube shows right now in 5 minutes. It's a long list nowadays. And that just means there's that much information out there and people talking about the concepts in a way they weren't even a couple years back. So anyway, but before we talked about Wizards in the shape of the game, I did want to make that point that it's not always just about the cards. But, it's a little bit about the cards. I also want to make a note here, looking at Max's notes, the very first line he has is, WotC is pushing us down this path, ? And then it made me kind of go back and I want to reframe what I said, because I don't think it's also necessarily intentional. I don't think they necessarily care about the state of Commander in terms of how fast or how powerful it is. That's just a side result of what they're doing. I don't think there's any intent here. I'm not sure anyone's in a room saying, how can we make Commander faster or more efficient or more powerful or whatever. I just think the conversation is, how can we sell more packs for more cards? And the result of that is what's changing the face of the game. So I think that's a good way to phrase it. The way you wrote that, Max, made me go back and reframe what I'm saying. I don't think this is necessarily intentional. It's just the end result of what they're doing, making strong cards to sell packs, then changes the game. And I don't think there's any intent behind it. So, you had a few bullet points here beyond that, Max. What were those?
Yeah, so this whole, feeling like we're being pushed down a path or like Commander playstyle is somewhat homogenized, I think it's kind of twofold. I think the first thing is about WotC realizing that they need to sell the product no matter what. And so they're doing that via marketing with people. I'm going to use the cigarette reference you used earlier, Dana. Camel used John Wayne as one of their biggest advertisers of cigarettes. Well, everybody knew who John Wayne was in the 50s, so of course, my hero is smoking cigarettes. I want to smoke cigarettes. They sold more packs of cigarettes. So WotC's kind of taking that ideology and using it for the game with streaming, Just think about, what if Ninja, the most popular streamer in the world, started playing Magic Arena? What is that going to do for WotC, whether it's for Arena or being able to say, well, Ninja now is sponsored by Wizards of the Coast. Hey, Ninja's now on Command Zone. He's doing game nights. He's now playing Commander. All these younger kids and even, teenagers and young adults that spend their time watching Twitch and watch Ninja go like, oh, Ninja's now playing Magic. instead of Fortnite, I'm going to go start playing Magic because Ninja plays it. I think that's...
Well, we kind of saw that recently with Pokemon when
Channel Fireball.
Jake Paul.
Channel Fireball picked up Pokemon.
Well, no. I think it was Jake Paul or was it Logan Paul? One of the two YouTube Pauls, and I'm not cool enough to know which one.
Neither am I.
Cracked open a box of Pokemon cards or something on stream, and then like sold or bought an old Charizard, I think it was. And as a result of that, the price on Pokemon cards, particularly old Pokemon cards, have like doubled in the last month or so, with people now suddenly chasing down old Pokemon stuff just because of that event. So yeah, absolutely. Like if Ninja did it, we would see a huge change in the amount of people that were playing, and that has nothing to do with like. That is also a thing that has nothing to do with the cards they're printing. It's just you're just going to see change and more people involved based on that.
I hope Ninja
Right.
goes and plays Arena and he crashes a server so they fix it and make it better.
So that's one aspect. I think the other thing is when it comes to card design now, I think WotC is trying to check too many boxes at once. And so I'm going to use Nyxbloom Ancient as my example. So this is an enchantment creature elemental for 4 and triple green, and it's a 5/5. And of course it says, whenever you tap a permanent for mana, it creates 3 times that much mana. So when you look at that card, and granted this came from Theros Beyond Death, so I get why it's an enchantment for the set itself, because that's an enchantment-themed set. But it's also an elemental, which is huge in the EDH realm because you have your Omnaths, you have, Horde of Notions, you have all these elemental tribal decks where this just can get slotted in, not because of what it does, just because it's an elemental. On top of that, it has this absurdly powerful ability of tripling the amount of mana you create from your permanent. So those are, 4 boxes that WotC checked with a single card. Yes, it's a mythic, great, but again, there are 17 different types of packs you could have bought for Theros, so the print run is high. You're going to crack them pretty often, in my opinion. I'm not a math expert, so I'm probably wrong on that. But if you really look at that card, you could easily remove enchantment from it, or you could remove creature from it and just make it an enchantment. Or you could just not make it an elemental, and I think that card is a lot less powerful. It's still powerful, but it's not as scary, I think, because it's not checking so many boxes that could help slot into so many different themes or strategies in Commander specifically.
Well, and in order to top that now, so they created an Nyxbloom Ancient that was really, really splashy, and people talked about it and wanted to chase it down for their decks, and now they've done that.
Yep.
So now when you release the next thing, and you need to have the next card that people want to chase down for their decks that's really splashy and really, you have to top Nyxbloom Ancient. Or when you put the next mana rock in the next series of Brawl decks that you want all the Commander players to hunt down and buy to put that rock on their Commander deck, like I'm going to guess they did with Arcane Signet, like that was the purpose of that. How do you top that? So
Right.
it continues to ratchet things in that direction without it being intended to ratchet them up in terms of power, just to get you to go buy those packs. It just alters the face of the game. So, okay, so we've broke down a little bit the changing face of the game, and I think we all kind of agree it's not necessarily anyone's fault, or at least an intentional fault of anyone. But like Dylan, you mentioned you play CEDH, but you like a line drawn between those two things that you play, and that line is definitely power-based. If we're seeing the power push Commander closer to what CEDH does, and I think there's an element of that for sure that's happened. So what do you do, specifically Dylan, to kind of dodge that or push back against it, or at least not get like sucked along in just the natural kind of tide in the way they're flowing?
Yeah, so I think the cool thing about EDH is that, there's not a Pro Tour to go to. There's not a Mythic Championship to look to at the end of the year, or even an in-store event necessarily. Some stores have their own little EDH events, but you're playing for yourself and for the fun of your friends, right? That's the whole point of all of this. So I think, all of the things that we just talked about kind of contribute to this sense of feeling of missing out, FOMO, right? But taking a step back and asking yourself, like, why am I playing this? What do I like about Magic? I don't know about you guys, but for me, it's the cool card combinations. It's hitting your thing on curve. It's playing a card and someone going, what is that? Some crazy 8-card plan coming together. So to kind of play towards this, there's a couple of things that I really like to do. My biggest thing is when I'm building a quote-unquote casual deck, is building to a mechanical theme. And that does not include making the best possible deck for that theme, but making a deck that encompasses that mechanical theme in the best possible way, right? Or sometimes you even have the room for this in the most competitive way. So taking something that is not good, but making it as good as it can be with the correct support cards to make it something that really, really comes together. So that Quende Double Strikers deck I have, I've got a Mana Crypt and a Mana Vault in there. I've got True Conviction in there. I've got Avacyn, the Indestructible Avacyn. But the core theme itself, the things that are actually winning me the game and hitting face, it's a bunch of stupid dudes with First Strike on them, right? But everything really feels like it's revolving around this plan. Another deck that I have that I really like is a pseudo CEDH. I don't think I can even call it that, but it's a terrible combo deck where I set out with a goal of I want something crazy to happen when Primal Surge resolves, but I don't necessarily just want to win the game with some onboard combo or whatever. So I designed this ridiculous green-white deck that when Primal Surge resolves, you get an infect creature that bypasses combat damage, that bypasses blockers. The name escapes me. I should probably look it up. Slapping the sword on it that has Myriad to send it at all three players, as well as some power toughness pumps. So it's this weird combo, quote unquote, right? But the entire deck is actually supported by Clue and Investigate as a support theme. So it's bad, but the way it plays out is very satisfying, and you get people that you're playing with get a kick out of it. It's it's a fun way to play.
I believe the card you are looking for is Spinebiter.
Spinebiter, yes, absolutely. So yeah, and there's some other support cards in there to stop people from casting anything, Grand Abolisher, Haste Enablers on the board, all permanents, right? So you resolve that Primal Surge and all of your support cards come out, everyone looks at the board and they're like, oh wait, I can't actually do anything about this. So, it's the same as doing your Aetherflux Reservoir dramatic reversal thing, but it's got a different flavor to it, it feels different.
Sure, that makes sense. It's kind of an extension, I guess, of Jason Alt's kind of original 75% theory where, he's building the deck with kind of limitations baked in of some sort. And then that also gives you a little bit of freedom to tune as well without worrying about over-tuning. I think the Quende deck's a good example of a deck where, you mentioned Mana Crypt, Mana Vault. You can do those kinds of things in certain decks, and there's just a ceiling. There's only so far you can push that kind of deck, regardless of what you run in it. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I also think that there are some quote unquote tuned cards that are less a problem than others. I'll use Nature's Claim for an example. It's a card that shows up in CEDH a lot. It's a naturalize for 1 green that gains your opponent 4 life, which is largely meaningless in Commander. And it gets played there because it's just hyper efficient. Single green mana, instant speed, solve a problem. That isn't a problem in regular Commander either, even though it doesn't see much play there. But if you were playing non-CEDH and you add Nature's Claim to your deck, it's absolutely a CEDH card, and it's better, but it's not winning you the game. No one's using that to win the game. They're using it to keep someone else from winning or to keep from losing. And there are definitely cards that are of a power level that also that's going to shift the game a little bit, but it's also not going to do it in a way that probably significantly alters anyone's fun or play experience versus something like opening with the Mox Diamond, Mana Vault, Lion's Eye Diamond, and then dropping 10 mana worth of stuff on turn 1 when no one else can respond to it. That does change that game's play experience. So I think understanding the difference between just being efficient at solving problems and being hyper efficient at winning, I think those are 2 different things as well. I think we just got the reprint of was it Grim Tutor in the core set?
Yes, in core set, correct.
Which was an unavailable card for a long time, literally in some contexts because you just couldn't find one, but also unavailable because it was expensive. And it's now available to a lot of people, but maybe you don't need, just because Grim Tutor exists, maybe you don't need that as your 5th tutor in your deck, or 4th tutor, or 3rd tutor even. So that's another thing. It's very easy to, just because a piece exists and is now affordable to you, doesn't mean you have to make that conscious choice to run it, particularly when the primary use of it tends to be going to get this card that wins me the game. So there, a lot of this stuff is also can wind up being conscious choices. And really, we all do that to a degree. Like, you have to draw the line somewhere. I think everyone's always done it. If you aren't playing the CEDH deck, you've made conscious choices to not play at that power level. So you can do that as well with the kind of changing face of the game on kind of a lower level if you choose to.
Well, see, you could. I personally think you could still play like CEDH level. Like, say you can play a Storm deck CEDH level with Grape Shot or whatever, and you just go, I'm just going to Grape Shot the board away. I'm not going to hit a single player. I'm just going to blow up every creature on the board. And then I'm going to recur my Grape Shot and do it again the next turn type of deal. You know, you're not limiting them from winning the game, but you're not like going combo on them neither. So.
Well, and if you, and also it's one of those things that if you didn't use 4 tutors to find all the pieces to make it happen, then my attitude's going to be, well, you just lucked into it and you're not going to do that every game. So, okay.
Yeah.
Like that's also a different thing if you happen to find that perfect combo by finding it versus tutoring up that perfect combo every time with the 14 tutors in your deck. Those are two very, very different things.
Yeah, I've watched combo decks like Azami combo decks where they're drawing a billion cards or whatever, and they still don't find their win con until like the very last moment, and like, oh, okay, now I can combo off, and you're like, yeah, we knew you were gonna do it. It's quite amusing watching you fail the whole time though.
So, well, Chris, you are someone who plays Modern, and so you have that in quite consistently, or at least you did pre-COVID. So you absolutely are someone who has a, like, I want to win in a serious environment mindset, and that's something you've never had a problem really separating when it came to play Commander. You've been able to wall those two things off successfully.
It's actually really easy, in my opinion. Like, for me, Commander is more of a game where I just sit down, I look at my 7 cards, I'm like, hey, I got 3 lands, and these other cards are playable. They have no synergy whatsoever. Let's just see how this game goes. I don't even care anymore. I mean, that's how I look at Commander usually when I'm playing.
I wonder if maybe it even isn't a little bit easier for some people in your position because you have the ability to work out that kind of competitive bug in your system when you're playing Modern, and then it's not there anymore when you go sit down and play Commander.
Yeah, it becomes very draining though, being very competitive and like grinding tournaments and other stuff like that. So when you want to just play the game that you fell in love with, you go to your Commander and it's just, I just want to play. I don't care if I win. I don't care if I lose. I'm going to just have fun and do wacky shenanigans, and I'm going to drop this, vampiric tutor and tutor up a land because I'm missing a land and just be all ham.
Well, I think that's the thing people forget. Commander was originally created by a bunch of high-level judges who absolutely were capable of playing at the tippy-top level of performance in the game and chose not to because they were tired out from a long weekend of judging tournaments and just wanted to drink and goof off.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we go back to the beginning of Magic, I just want to jam, a Shivan Dragon out there and, have some fire breathing going on and everything. And now, the game's evolved to the point where Shivan Dragon's worthless, but it's still, you're missing that magic of what the cards originally were.
Well, what was it that when we had Sheldon Menery on the EDH Recast said that like the rules committee had 22 levels worth of judges on it? It's like you literally probably couldn't put more people with more judge experience in a room than you have when you have the rules committee together. Just like you physically can't put 4 people together that have more experience. So yeah, those guys are absolutely people that know how to play at that level and are choosing not to. So the history of the game kind of has, from the very beginning, has involved people trying to like push back against that a little bit for their own fun. This is that they're choosing to play at a lower level.
I do love we were at that one GP or whatever, and when I was playing Approach of the Second Sun, and we had to call a judge, and we ended up getting like the L3, like the head L3 of our local area comes over, sees who is playing. He's like, okay, I'll look at this. He looks at the cards. He's like, give me a minute. I need to go check on this. This is a new interaction for me.
Well, and he even said it's always you Commander players that come up with the best questions.
Because, I mean, that's judges like that, they like that, because they know that you're not playing for fun, or you're not playing seriously, so it's not like this is do or die break if I don't find a ruling. This is more of let's see what we can find out for them.
It becomes a puzzle. Then.
Yes.
So I'll throw it back to you here, Dylan. So in your personal experience now, what things have you encountered in games? I don't know if recent's the right word, but in the last couple of years that you've specifically noticed are now different because of the change in the kind of card creation philosophy we've gotten from WotC?
Yeah, so this is actually something that you guys have talked about before. and it's that board wipes seem to be positioned so differently now. I used to have, 5, 6, 7, 8 board wipes in nearly every deck. It felt like a necessity in a day where the way you won was dropping huge enchantments or creatures and going ham. And so board wipes kind of helped keep that in check. Something I've noticed recently is that, board wipe past the turn, that's not enough these days a lot of the time. There just seems to be so much consistency and power at every corner of people's decks these days, even the casual ones in terms of consistency, that I've noticed mass destruction has changed its role a bit from an end-all, be-all answer to a temporary band-aid. You still might lose the next turn, and I think that's been something I've had actually a lot of trouble planning for in my decks.
Just getting used to that how much more rapidly the game can swing to a victory when you're not ready for it, you mean?
Exactly. And I mean, going back to the game that you and I played, Max, I think there was a board wipe, and then you played, what was it, Replenish?
Yes. Yeah. I recast Tuvasa and went right into a Replenish.
Right, and, Replenish isn't a new card, but I feel like it's seeing a little bit more play these days. It's a little bit more well known about. And there's a lot of other cards like that, mass graveyard reversals, or not even really caring that your things are destroyed due to all the ways that you can squeeze value out of your hand and your cards.
So this is the way to fix it. Now, everyone, just follow me with this. I don't want anything.
Oh no!
So we have all these mass board wipes. So we're just talking about how the old school games used to be, and they take like 5 or 6 turns to rebuild. So let's just change it to massive land destruction. Because
that will solve the problem.
Hey, that happened to me in that game as well. So
it actually did.
I won that game with 3 lands.
Nice.
I definitely think board wipes still hold a place, though. I mean, I look at my Dromoka deck, and I have 6 board wipes and 7 other pieces of targeted removal, but I think it's all based on the fact that I'm expecting people to rebuild. I've identified that's kind of how the game has shifted, and that's why I lean that deck that plays slower to pack more of a removal package, because eventually they're not going to be able to rebuild. Eventually, I'm going to outboard wipe everybody and still have maybe 2 in my deck. So I think it also depends on how you want to play and how you want the game to go.
I think board wipes fall into the category of it helps to even out the playing field. Like, because some person might go ham, the first 6 turns, and they get, they have their God opening type of deal, not saying that we're playing CEDH or anything, but, say they get like 30 tokens out. Well, that board wipe actually levels the playing field so the other players can actually catch up to where they were after you wrath everything out.
Well, the board wipe thing has definitely changed as well. I remember that one of the first white decks I built, looking at, there's, Wrath of God, there's Day of Judgment. I think Austere Command was still out by then. There was a few weird old ones like Akroma's Vengeance and
Planar Cleansing.
Yeah, Planar Cleansing was out, I think. Winds of Wrath. I mean, there's a few of them. But like you could on one hand go down the list count the list of white board wipes that were available, and I want to run this one, and that's okay. Today, there's, 20 different white board wipes that you can pick, a lot of which are quite good. And if you wanted to run 6 or 7 good board wipes in a deck, you absolutely can. You didn't used to have to think to yourself, is this going to make for a bad play experience if I'm wiping the board every turn? Because you didn't have enough good board wipes to run enough that was ever even a question. It's a question now.
Oh.
So those kind of things have came up as well.
I did not realize that was a question. Good to know.
Well, it's actually part of the reason I mentioned that too is we had that conversation on the EDH Recast on our stream, because we had a game a couple weeks back. I don't even remember who the guest was, where Matt was playing, I think, his Selesnya deck that has like 5 or 6 board wipes in it, and he just happened to hit all of them.
Mm-hmm.
And it turned into a situation where the game took 2 hours because he just had a board wipe to reset. And they were logical reasons. He cast them at appropriate points in time, but it just drug the game out to a 2-hour game because he had them in hand. And afterwards he went, I believe he pulled 2 of them out of that deck specifically because he's like, it just made for bad television, kind of. He's like, it just wasn't an enjoyable experience at that point to keep resetting the board. And that just wouldn't have been an issue 5 years ago because there weren't enough board wipes that were probably good enough to even justify a slot in that deck. Are there any other things like that you guys can think of that, like the amount? I mean, Planeswalkers, I guess, will be another one. Like, I remember, Return to Ravnica era.
There was only the 5 all the time.
Yeah, well, you'd build a deck and you're like, well, there's 2 Jaces and one of them costs $100, so there's 1 Jace, and there's 2 Chandras and 2 Ilyanas, and hey, we've got a second Gideon and 1 Elspeth, and like you could just name the available planeswalkers, off the top of your head and determine if they were good enough for your deck. And when you saw one, you just knew what the abilities were because there was only a few planeswalkers. Now that we're 300 or 400 deep, I don't even know what the number is, but like it's probably close to 300, I would bet at this point in time. You don't remember what the 14 different Chandras all do, number one, but number two, like your deck has to be able to interact with them, and planeswalkers can be tricky to interact with. And when you only had 12 of them and 4 of them were good, it wasn't as big of a deal as maybe it is today when you're like, well, that Narset just came down and now I can't draw any more than 1 card a turn. That has changed things too, I think.
Don't hurt my Narset.
Narset's awesome.
I've definitely noticed that change with Planeswalkers in that I guess I've got kind of this boomer mentality with Planeswalkers where someone plays a Planeswalker and I go, they're not very good in EDH. Focus on the face or,
sure.
Just, move on with the tempo game plan or whatever you're doing. Like, I'm not going to let it be relevant. But I found myself in many, many situations recently having to rethink that. I just had a most recent game right after you and I played, Max, where someone had the War of the Spark Sorin that reanimates a guy. I let that thing sit on the board for 3 turns while I was swinging face at the owner. He ended up resurrecting his stuff a bunch, and I was, they're like, why didn't you just hit the Sorin? And I was like, I don't know. One single smack and he would have been gone, but I think there were 2 or 3 other planeswalkers on the board at the same time, especially over things like Spell Table. It can be kind of hard to get a value differentiation when there's several planeswalkers on the board in addition to all of the other permanents and cards in people's hands. Reading is hard.
Well, webcam does add an element to that as well, trying to figure out what's going on for sure. Particularly planeswalkers, you're like, what is the ult at? Well, what's that dice say? And you're trying to like do that math, and then you forget about it, which is something I've absolutely done. So some of this also, I think, is when we're talking about push power level, it's probably not a coincidence that when you go over the top 20 most popular commanders in EDH Rec, 17 of them or something are from the last 2 years. There's some recency bias too, like people tend to build something that's new, but there's just a lot of new, really, really powerful commanders. And that has changed the face of things. We have way more commanders today that were put together in the last couple of years where like my reaction is, I can't let you play that. Because if you play that commander and you sit untouched for 30 seconds, you're going to generate too much value for me to catch up to. Yeah. I think that's also something that's tweaked the game that maybe wasn't that way. Look at the scary commanders from yesteryear where people were like, oh no, Rafiq.
Yeah.
If you saw Rafiq today, I'm not worried about Rafiq.
I kind of just laugh when I see Rafiq decks now.
Yeah.
Right. I used to get groans playing Aloro. Oh geez, can you not? I mean, nowadays it's like, okay, whatever.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I mean Rafiq might one-shot somebody, but then he'll die.
Right.
Like it's so that's definitely been a change too. So okay, so we talked about a lot of these things and the things you can do to kind of push back on that, at least when you brew your own deck and what you do a little bit to tweak that. Is that something you've ever had to have a conversation with about two other people that you're playing with? I'll ask you, Dylan, like, is that something that you've ever had to address to people like, hey, could you change this? Is there a good way to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. That kind of brings us to a more social aspect of things, right? Rather than a competitive aspect. I've definitely found myself in this scenario where someone just really gets into their deck and starts adding tons of power, and it gets better and better over the weeks that you're playing. Or maybe they just like the powerful commanders and strategies in general, whatever the flavor of the week is, and that's fine too. But like we've discussed, it's easier and easier to really hit that oppressive power spike for certain things. So I've definitely had conversations with people. I think it's really important to come at it through that lens of this is something that we're all doing to have fun with each other as human beings. The gameplay is secondary, so, I've talked to people and been like, hey, dude, your deck is crazy, like, can I take a look at it, or what made you, build it that way? And I like to be an apostle for the deck building mindset that I've had of, hey, have you considered this? And, it's a less good version of this, but it would really play into that theme that you're playing, right? Just kind of coming at it with a helpful attitude and mindset of, hey, you want some help tinkering that? Because, man, you're kicking our butt. But I think there's some really good strategies in here that we could make really fun. Now, this depends on the kind of relationship that you have with your fellow players.
Right.
Some people don't want to hear it. You don't like my deck, right? But I think just sitting down and having a genuine, open-ended conversation of like, hey, I feel like we might be a little bit mismatched. Can you maybe meet me halfway? Yeah, just talk to your friends.
People tend to be open to that conversation if you approach it politely and if you're not salty about something that just happened. If you you yourself are relatively even keeled about the language, people are usually open to having that conversation because it is the kind of thing that's easy to screw up. I've absolutely sat down at games and played with people where not even necessarily the cards in my deck, but like the interaction between those cards just put my deck at a power level that theirs wasn't matched to. I can think of a couple scenarios, particularly at like GPs or Command Fest or something, where I've sat with some players and looked at their decks. I'm like, okay, they're playing, that person's got a Derevi and that person's got this. And I'll err on the side of caution and grab something that's kind of mid-tier. And then by the time turn 7 rolls around, I realize it's not that I'm running really strong cards, but the cards I've picked interact with one another in a way that I'm just going to win this game. I can't even see how I'm going to win it, but I can tell you in 5 turns or 6 turns, the amount of value I'm generating compared to the amount of value they're generating, I'm going to win this game. And that becomes a tricky thing to talk about too, when like you can't point to one particular thing and say, well, you're running a Mana Crypt and a Mox Diamond and no one else can keep up with that. Or you're running 10 tutors and you're going for your win condition and no one else can deal with that. In this case, it wasn't even one particular thing. It was just like, because I talk about Commander all week long and I read about it and, write about it and do those kind of things, I just tend to have some understanding of how cards interact that probably gives me advantages compared to someone who thinks about it for 10 minutes a week. And that's a really difficult thing, I think, to moderate as well. And all you can do is talk it over and, try to make sure no one's upset, because you are going to get mismatches like that no matter what you do.
That's why I've said it before numerous times, and I know I've gotten blasted for this, but sometimes you just pull your punches. Just let it go.
Yeah, no, you do. Right, you bet. Especially against strangers somewhere. I would rather, because they're never going to know too.
Yeah, I mean, if you look over at your opponent, and say, I'm an older gentleman, so say I'm playing against a younger kid, 16, 17, and they have this great big smile on their face, and they're just having this fun, and I'm holding this Path to Exile, and I could just blow them out, and I'm just like, no, I'm just going to let them kill me. Because they're having fun. There's no reason to just completely abolish it. I mean, if you're that kind of monster, then I guess more power to you. Live your life, but that's not me.
Well, Chris, to use specific examples, we have a friend of ours, and we've talked about Dr. Mike on the show before, who's a relatively new match. At least he was 3 years ago. He started playing Texas.
I just jam him in the deck. Oh, come on, man. What are you doing?
But he did like when he first started playing, when he was very green, and I know Max and I both at multiple points in time pulled punches in games or let him have a win, particularly when he's been playing for 2 weeks, because you want to keep that person coming back. And that's, that was a situation where we were probably playing our lowest power decks anyway, but we've been playing 70 years and he's been playing 70 hours. That's just a situation where there's almost no way you can brew a deck that's going to be an even match against someone who has been, just picked up the game. So you have to do that thing sometimes too. I absolutely am in agreement there.
That's why another thing that you should do, if you have a good group of friends, borrow one of their decks. Don't look at it. Just take the deck, shuffle it up, and play it. Because you have no clue how the deck's supposed to work because you didn't brew it, you didn't build it. So just shuffle it up, play it, and see how things go.
Okay, so we probably should look to wrap this up here, but Dylan, do you have any final points, or do you have any final points here? Man, we talked a lot, but I'm not sure if we discussed what you wanted to discuss.
Enough. This was totally cool. I liked what we went over. I would say one thing to ask yourself, dovetailing out of the recent conversation you had, was ask yourself, is my 750th win of Commander really going to make me feel any better than maybe letting somebody else have a really, really, really good time? I've definitely found myself with that counterspell in hand. Somebody has the win. They're playing it out, and I look at my hand and I'm like, I'm not winning this in the next 5 turns. We're an hour and 30 minutes into this. No response. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying throw all of your games so everyone can have fun. There's there's a balance to things, but keeping that positive, healthy mindset of like, why am I here? I'm here to have fun, and I can extract that in ways other than a win. I think is a really big part of Magic for me, at least Commander, and I think a lot of people would do better to maybe internalize that a little bit more.
Yeah, I do like that aspect a lot. It's something I wrote down in my notes too, where, you're playing a game and maybe just, make it a personal challenge to yourself to be like, I want to see if I can figure out exactly how this game is being maneuvered. And if it all clicks in my brain, this is how this is going to play out, and it plays out that way, then to yourself, okay, I could have stopped this. I could have won this game. I challenged myself, but I gave them a good time at the same time.
Sure. You bet. And I think everyone maybe needs to look a little bit at what you want to take away from the game too. And I'm not saying winning isn't a takeaway. Like if you're only happy when you win the game, that is what it is. I'm not saying you're wrong necessarily either, but like I have discovered over the years that I very much get satisfaction from winning a certain way. Like if I had to choose between, winning with a really easy and obvious combo that I tutor up or losing my own way, I would choose to lose my own way. I want to see my deck do a thing with weird cards that people have to like, what is that? That is the win to me. That experience is what I most enjoy. And I think if people explored that aspect of the game a little bit more, other than worrying about making sure that you have the absolute tightest list possible. And again, there's nothing wrong with that either, but like I think that people might find that there's some other aspects of the game they can get an equal amount of enjoyment from if they just take a look at that.
Yeah, I have a story about a friend of mine when we were at a GP playing against a professional player. And professional players, they're all about, their W's, all that stuff. And he wasn't doing too good during the day, So they sat down there playing. And the player that I know, he made a misplay. So the professional called a judge over. As soon as the judge came up, he looked at the judge square-faced, no expression. He said, "This guy's cheating." And then the judge whirled on him, and immediately the professional started laughing, because all he was doing was he was having a good time trying to make, a memory for the player that he's playing with. And that's what you got to look at, is make memories for everyone that you're playing with. Don't make it where it's like, I don't ever want to play this again, or I don't want to play with this person, because they don't care about the game. They just want to pub stomp everybody.
Right.
Well, that just brings up, like a few weeks ago on a show, I talked about a game where I was playing with EDH Rec guys, and Matt Morgan cast some Hellion, Crater Hellion maybe, that deals 4 damage to all creatures, and his beater creature survived and mine didn't. And then I was able to sudden spoiling him when he swung and turn his creatures to 0/2s, and they all died because he had marked 4 damage on them from that Crater Hellion. I won that game. I didn't mention it on when we were talking about the games we played, but I wound up winning that game a couple turns later. But that wasn't the important part of that game. The important part of that game to me was using that sudden spoiling after the Crater Hellion came down to kill all his creatures when he thought he had the Alpha Strike win. That was my win. Even if I hadn't won the game, that play was my win, being able to find that opening. So find those things, I think, is a helpful thing. I want to encourage people to do, is find those things that make you happy, even if they aren't necessarily the win or the highest power level. Look for those little things that are your own form of winning.
Yeah, I love it when I ult my Aminatu and I switch the board state. Everyone gets everyone else's cards, and then they're absolutely confused. Like, what do I do with this stuff now? I love it when stuff like that
That's
happens.
really fun.
Dana, you said something that I really try to adhere to even to this day when you're talking about Dr. Mike, is you want that new player to come back, whether it's the next week to your LGS or next week to your VEDH, game. And that's always kind of what I want. I want that player to come back and play again and say, hey, you know what? I learned from you last week. I did some stuff. Let's see if I can beat you this week. And it's not about the win. It's just the fact that they came back and want to keep playing this game, because it's about the gathering, no matter how we gather, in person, virtual, through, a Skype call like we're doing right now. We're still gathering and talking about this game we all love.
Yeah, you're making friends then that then extend beyond the scope of just the game.
Exactly.
Be the change that you want to see in the world.
There we go.
Scumbag.
A good little or be the scumbag if that's what you want to be. That'll be our little bullet point. Well, Dylan, thank you very much for coming on the show. We appreciate it. We appreciate all your support over the years.
Of course. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right. I think that is going to wrap it up. Dylan, why don't you tell everyone where they can find you online if they want to say hey or find a game?
Yeah, sure. I'm not very around on the internet, but you can catch me on the CMDR Central Slack. Dylan. And you can also find me on Twitter, if that's your thing, at seething_song.
All right. You can find me on the Twitter birds at Dana Roach. You can find Max at CMDRCentral_Max. And you can find Chris at WiseSquishy1. You can find our podcast editor, Rafael Garcia, at Ursa Bearwalker. And that is going to wrap up this show. Our podcast theme is Retro Future Dirty by Kevin MacLeod, licensed to Creative Commons. And we will be back next week. Until then, I am Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.
And I'm Dylan.